Hello, Temple of Aaron. My name is Jamie Wynn-Bell, and today we're going to bake round challah together to celebrate Rosh Hashanah. I want to start by letting you know that my family, we have a different tradition when it comes to baking our sweet challah for Rosh Hashanah. Many families will put raisins or chocolate chips in their Rosh Hashanah challah. My family really likes to stuff our challah with apples and honey. So what I've done in order to be prepared to stuff each of the individual strands is that I've diced up one small tart baking apple. I happen to have Zestar apples at my house right now from my CSA, and so that's what I have already diced up. Each of these little pieces of apple are really, really small. So I've cut them super small, like you're making haroset for Passover. I like to sweeten it up a little bit with just a little bit of honey. You don't want to use too much because if you have too much honey in this, it's going to get really wet and it's going to make it actually harder for your strands to be able to stay together and make it so that your challah will stay together when it's baking and not open up and show all of those apple pieces that are coming out through the individual strands. So once I get this honey kind of stirred in, I'm going to add a little bit of cinnamon as well, and then that will make our filling that we'll put into each of the individual strands. All right, I made my dough earlier in the day today. So I made my dough, it went through its rise, and now it's ready for me to pull it out and knead it again before I then will separate it into two separate big dough balls that will make two large size challahs. It also is a challah that's made with honey. I use this for my regular Shabbat challah as well because I really like it. It's not as sweet as some of the other Rosh Hashanah challah recipes that you'll find online. Many other ones will use vanilla and a little bit of honey and maybe even some additional sugar. This one is just made with about 1/3 of a cup of honey, which gives it a really nice sweet flavor, but you can also put salt on it, which is something my family really likes in order to make it be used for your Shabbat as well. So when you get your dough out of the bowl, you will want to go ahead then and just knead it for a few minutes before you want to separate it. All right, so that looks pretty good to me. Again, pretty good sized dough ball here. And so I'm gonna go ahead and actually just separate it. I find it's easiest to cut it in half with a serrated knife. Do whatever works best for you. So to make this round challah, it's a 4-strand challah. That's what I tend to make for Rosh Hashanah. I find it's really easy to braid when it's a 4-strand round challah. It's, to me, actually an easier braid to make than really any of the other challahs that I make throughout the year. So to make your strands, starting with a nice round ball, just cut it into 4. Now, if you want to be precise and make sure you're going to have the same size strands, then you can go ahead and actually cut it into 4ths like this and then weigh it. And as long as you have the same weight on each of these small dough balls, then each of your strands will be the same size. Each one of these dough balls is going to be 1 strand on my round challah. So I'm spreading just a little bit of flour that I had remaining on my workspace out again, and I'm going to roll this out. But rolling out your strand is really important because this is how we're going to stuff the strand and actually get those apple pieces in it before we then get it to be rolled back up and made into our typical challah strand. A lot of people have family traditions when it comes to how they make their challah, especially when it comes to the high holy days and what you have done as a family over time. One thing I do want to share with all of you is that I actually am a Jew by choice. So I didn't grow up baking challah and getting prepared for the holidays with my mom and my bubby because that wasn't the traditions that we had. So I have built these traditions as an adult with my family. I do, however, think of my family of origin when I'm making my challah because I'm wearing an apron that was made for me by my grandmother. I grew up when I was a kid baking apple pie with my mom. And so being able to bring all of those traditions, no matter where you came from and where your family is from, is really important as you think about the holidays and you think about how we all connect with one another. Okay, we're not going for perfection here. We're just going for good enough. But again, trying to get my strands to be around the same length so that when I go ahead and braid them, it will be a little bit easier and I won't have a bunch of excess on one of the strands or a strand that's way shorter than its friends. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to stuff this strand. You want to take your filling and you want to place some on your dough. Do not overfill the strand. You want to make sure that you have enough filling on the dough that you'll be able to taste the apple, but not so much that it's going to either poke through or make your dough really wet and unable to be rolled up. So that's probably just a right amount of filling right there. And then you want to roll towards the filling from the long end on your strand, and you will end up rolling in the filling. These strands are really easy to break open. Pieces of apple are wet and they poke. And so having less filling is the right way to make sure that you'll be able to actually roll your strand up. Okay. Once you get the strand rolled up, you also do want to just pinch anywhere that you have a seam so that it doesn't pop back open, and make sure that it's really well closed. Our other option, if you don't want to fill your strands, is that you could add apples right into the dough. But again, it's going to make the water content of your dough much higher than if you put in something like raisins. Raisins, because they're dehydrated, are not going to add additional water into your dough, but your apples will, especially if you soak them in honey like I did at the beginning of this. It will help to make them sweat some of their liquid out. So I've just found that it works better to stuff the strands. All right. When you're starting your round braid, you want to take the 4 strands and you want to lay them out to begin a weave. The way that I usually do that is that I set them out so that they look like a pound or a hashtag, but they actually have the weave in the center. So you want to make sure that you have that overlapping middle where you laid down 2 and then you put 2 on top and ensured that you had 1 that went under on each strand. So now you'll have 2, 2, 2, and 2, and you'll always have 2 strands together. This is actually a really easy braid once you get going, and it's really simple to be able to do. So what you want is you're always going to put your underneath strand over the one next to it so that it's up by its neighbor. So I'm starting here, this one is the underneath strand, and I'm going to go up and over, and then now I have 3, so I'm going to look for the one that's under, and I'm going to take that and go up and over and do it again. So this is the one that's under, it's going to go up and over, and here again, up and over. And then you're going to go back in the other direction, and you're always taking the strand that is currently underneath. So you can see that now I have 2, 2, 2, and 2, and I'm going to begin again in the same place I did before, but I'm taking the one that's now under, and I'm going to go up and over its neighbor. Okay, and then here I'm doing the same, up and over, up and over, up and over. All right, so I have a nice little weave in the middle. Depending on how long your strands are, at this point you may be able to get 1 more time around, or you may need to just go ahead and tuck them under. I'm going to try for 1 more time around, but I might be getting a little optimistic with what I'm able to accomplish here. We're going to see. Nope, I'm not going to do that. So now that I've reached the end, and this is what my braid looks like, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just wrap these together and then tuck them underneath. So again, take the one that was under, bring it over by its partner, tuck it underneath, take the one that was under, over by its partner, and tuck it underneath. I already have a piece of apple that's trying to pop out of one of my strands right here. I'm going to go ahead and tuck that in so that the dough can rise again over it and hopefully cover up that apple. So now I have a nice tucked braid, and I'm going to place it on a sheet pan that either has a silicone mat or a piece of parchment paper on it. In my case, I've gone ahead and used a silicone mat. I'm going to put an egg wash on this now as well in order to make it so that my dough will turn a really beautiful golden brown in the oven. To make an egg wash, you'll crack 1 egg into a bowl and add about a teaspoon or so of water, and then add just about a teaspoon or so of salt in order to make it have just that nice rich flavor. Then you're gonna want to whisk the egg, the water, and the salt together so that you can create a real yellowy, kind of thin egg liquid. This is what you're gonna brush onto your dough in order to create that really beautiful brown finish that we are all familiar with on our challah. I like to brush it on with a pastry brush. And I'm not shy with my egg wash. Okay. This challah is now going to rest for about 30 minutes. I'll show you what it looks like when you know that it's ready to bake. With my challah recipe and with my 1 apple that I diced up to use as filling, I was able to make 2 good-sized round challahs. They may not look that large on my baking sheets right now, but they are going to get significantly bigger during their additional rise as well as during the oven, when they will rise 1 more time due to the heat from the oven itself. One thing to know with these stuffed strands is that as they continue to rise, they can pop open and little pieces of apple can start poking out. Just makes it prettier. Okay, so the dough has now been rising. A typical additional rise would be somewhere in the ballpark of 30 to 45 minutes. Mine has taken quite a bit longer today because it's really chilly in my kitchen. So what you want to look for in order to identify if your final rise is complete is if you push in on your dough and your indent stays. So you'll see that the indent in my dough has stayed when I've pushed in. It doesn't just immediately pop back out. That's how you know that you're ready to go ahead and put this in the oven and have it go through its baking process. Before I put this in the oven, I'm going to do 1 more egg wash on it, and then it's going to bake for about 40 minutes. Okay, this is the halfway point on the bake. I wanted to take these out and let you see how they continue to rise and get bigger. And you can see the spots where the dough is lighter because it doesn't have an egg wash. So I'm going to do 1 more egg wash before I pop these back into the oven. And I'm really just trying to hit all the spots that are still kind of white. It's still going to continue to expand and rise in the oven, and so I'm going to end up with some places on my dough that are white as the braid comes up and continues to rise in the oven, but this will help to create a more consistent color on the top of my challah as it continues through its baking process. I'm going to put these back in the oven now. I'm going to put them in for 15 minutes and I'm going to flip them. So I had this one on the bottom and this one on the top before. I'm going to switch within my oven so that they can get more consistent baking between them. At the 15-minute mark, I'm going to pull them out and check them. My family likes them to be cooked a little bit under. So my recipe calls for a second 20-minute bake. I likely am going to pull these out at 15 to maybe 17 minutes and have them be just a little bit under, because that's what creates that nice pull that you'll have on the challahs that we receive from Cecil's and that we have on Shabbat morning as well at Temple. So that's my tip for making sure that you get that right kind of dough pull when you are breaking your challahs apart to eat them. Okay, these challahs have just come out of the oven after their second bake. I'm now checking to see if they're done. The best way to do that is to actually go ahead and flip them over and then listen to see if they sound hollow when you knock on them. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that, but that is a hollow sounding challah. I can now assume that these are done and ready to be eaten. You can then let them rest and cool until you're ready to eat them as part of your Rosh Hashanah dinner. I want to take a moment and wish all of you at Temple of Aaron a sweet and happy New Year. Shana Tova. I hope that you have a sweet New Year with your families and you are able to spend really meaningful time together.